Welcome to Conversations with Dr. Skip Mason,
pastor, preacher, historian, author,
teacher, librarian, archivist, world traveler,
collector, family historian, avid reader, and creator of the popular Vanishing Black Atlanta Facebook page.
But a lot of folks who love history.
Most importantly, he's our dad who loves his family and who taught us the importance of our history and having important conversations.
Join him now for this episode of Conversations with Dr. Skip.
Well, good Sunday afternoon, my brothers and sisters beloved. I trust and pray that you had a wonderful day in the Lord. And I know to all of my fellow preachers and pastors and pontificators of the gospel, I know you preached a powerful word today. And to all of the lay, I know that you were blessed in the Lord today. So I'm so delighted to see you and to have you here for a wonderful conversation with a very, very special group of young preachers. And I certainly can call them young preachers. They may be young in age, but very wise and very able in the work that they're doing for the ministry of God and Christ and for the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. I greet our senior bishop, Lawrence L. Reddick III, and Sister Wendy Jones Reddick, our First Lady. I greet Bishop Kenneth Wayne Carter and Sister Rosea Carter. Bishop Carter is the chair of the College of Bishops, and I greet our distinguished College of Bishops and their wonderful spouses. I greet the chair of the CIT committee, Bishop James B. Walker and Mrs. Dolores Walker, and I greet the co-chair and my beloved bishop, Bishop Thomas Lewis Brown Sr., and Dr. Louise Baker Brown, our First Lady of the 6th Episcopal District. And I say hello to Dr. Teresa Duhart, all the way in Hawaii, who is on vacation. I am so happy for her. She has earned it. She deserves it. She worked so tremendously hard for our church, and I'm always grateful her for the support that she provides me and to all of us here in the CME Church. Before we get to our wonderful group, got a couple of announcements that I want to share with you. Of course, you get the emails and all, but I feel like I am certainly in partnership with all of the great things that are going on in the church. Of course, we are looking forward in great anticipation to our 39th quadrennial session and the 40th convening of General Conference, June 25th, 2022 through July 1st, 2022. And this is hosted by Bishop Marvin Frank Thomas, and it is going to be in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I know we're all looking forward to it. And I know especially those of us who are Philippians and are former students of Bishop Thomas, we're looking forward to that great gathering, that reception, that dinner, wherever you call us to hear some of your rambling thoughts. We know that it is coming. I also want to share with you that I will be leading a pilgrimage to the Holy Land along with members of the West Mitchell Street CME Church family, an 8-day pilgrimage in February of 2022. And we invite you to come and join us as we walk where Jesus walked. It is going to be a phenomenal trip, and I am looking so forward to returning back to the Holy Land. As you know, every Tuesday of this month, we have C-Me Grow, CME Grow, dialogues on developing vibrant congregations. Each Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern time, and the other times are noted. And here is a message from our General Secretary of Evangelism and Missions, Secretary.
Greetings, my beloved brothers and sisters in Christ. Some would say that evangelism is dead, but on the contrary, I believe evangelism is alive. During this Easter season, a time where we can share our faith, a time where we can witness, a time that's relevant to the times that we're living in, where there's evil running rampant on every hand. We are ready to share in a dialogue to give simplistic ways of faith sharing in evangelism. Join us every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. for See Me Grow. You be blessed. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, General Secretary Moore, and we look forward to sharing with you this evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. our General Secretary, Department of Finance and Investments, the hardworking Secretary Victor Moore, will have another one of his wonderful workshops, Church Economics, Financial Literacy, Building Blocks. And so you are encouraged to take a break after this show and tune in to watch General Secretary Victor Taylor as he talks about church economics and financial literacy building blocks. I know that we're going to be tremendously blessed by what he will share with us as well. Also be reminded, as Bishop Thomas would have me to remind you, that memberships are still being accepted for the NAACP Bishop William H. Graves Sr. Memorial Membership Campaign. And this campaign will last until May 31st. So if you have not had an opportunity to take your membership out, please do so, ma'am, and please do so, sir. So today, we have convened some wonderful and some of the best and brightest in our church. You know, I don't necessarily go with labels and titles, you know, because those change, but you know, as a metric for looking at the generations, we know that there are buzzwords that have been used. Generation X, Y, and Z, the millennials, and baby boomers. And throughout the show, I'm going to be running some of the definitions. I am a baby boomer, okay? And I was born in the 1960s, the early 1960s. Actually, I'll be 59 on my next birthday. So I'm a long way from Generation X or Generation Y and Z. Generation X, Generation S or Gen Xers refers to those born between the mid 1960s and the early 1980s. But you know what? Let me let you watch this for just a few minutes, and then we're going to bring this phenomenal panel in to talk about some issues and look at their ministry and things that are going on in our society.
Over brands. Accenture research tells us that Generation Z love tech-driven, fast shopping experiences like one-hour delivery, activated shopping, and in-store kiosks. Brands are less important, and they'll happily switch retailers who are better at providing these services. And they see shopping as a social experience. They like to consult friends and get opinions on products. They can be unforgiving when leaving reviews for retailers and are also twice as likely to consult YouTube as millennials before making a purchase. Number 8, different ways of learning. 75% of Generation Z say there are other ways of getting a good education other than the traditional route of going to college, according to Sparks and Honey research. And Generation Z has the beauty of hindsight on their side to see how things panned out for their counterparts. Many millennials now have large student debts and have been left questioning whether it was worth it, with 44% of recent college grads employed in jobs that do not require a degree. Number 9, tolerance. Millennials tend to be more tolerant than Generation Z, as they have generally encountered more situations in life where things have the potential to go wrong. For Generation Z, it's all about getting the job done, and problems for them usually mean it's time to look elsewhere. As an example, if Generation Z experience a technical hitch when making an online purchase, it's unlikely they'll visit that store again, whereas millennials will be more lenient and likely give the store.
Hey, so you get the point. We're all different, okay? We all have our quirks and our idiosyncrasies and all that. But I have today, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, some of the great minds and thinkers of our church, young minds, youthful minds, those that have not been worn and ravaged by time or CME church politics and all those issues. I guess they're still excited to be CME. You know, we love to say, I'm glad to be CME. I can hear Barbara Jackson and that crew, you know, walking around in their missionary outfits, and I'm glad to be CME. Well, we hope that these young pastors and preachers are glad to be CME. Let me introduce to you and put my Dollar Tree readers on. We have the Reverend Andrea Brayboy, and they will get an opportunity to tell you a little bit more about themselves. Reverend Andrea Brayboy, Pastor Zach Mullens, Pastor Leon Parker. We have Chaplain Captain Octavia Moore, newly minted elder as of yesterday, Reverend Joquan Kinsey. We have Pastor Nia Royal, and we have Pastor Andre C. Lloyd, who is actually en route from Nashville. So he'll be tuning in, but I told Andre to keep his eyes on the road and listen in. Good evening, preachers and pastors. Can you hear me?
Good evening. Good evening.
Okay, y'all, look, y'all talk back to me now. I know you've been out of the church, and you were some of you, and you missed the call and response. You know, because I tell you, it's hard preaching to a computer screen. I don't care what they say. You know, you need the interaction of the crowd. You know, and don't tell Bishop Dickey that every now and then you want to hear that organ. Just play a little something under the pastor. You know, that's an inside joke. We know that when the preacher's preaching and Bishop Lake is in the room and the organist starts to play, Bishop Lake is going to look over at the organist and he's going to send a vibe that says, you need to stop. You know, it doesn't take all of that. So shout out to Bishop Lake today. If he's listen, I am so delighted, first of all, to have you all with us and with me today. And you were selected in a number of ways. Fighting elders, some of you I've known personally, but we wanted to have a wonderful mix of preachers and pastors to make sure that we could tell the story of what you're dealing with and how you are handling both challenges within the church and all the things that are going on in the community as well. And so I'm going to give each of you an opportunity to present yourself. First of all, I want to recognize Colonel. I'm giving her an elevation. I'm sorry, Captain, Chaplain. I'll tell you, you got too many titles in front of you, honey. I'm sorry. She's my classmate from ITC, but Captain Octavia Moore. First of all, did you preach today?
No, I went to hear a friend preach.
You went to hear a friend preach. Okay. Well, before she comes on, and each of you will tell us just a little bit about yourself, where you go to school, how long you've been pastoring, but take a look at this.
So when I got my allowance to pay my debt, I had went to the candy store that Friday, and I can remember handing the man the money, and the man said, your debt is paid in full. As I leaped for Jesus' joy, I asked the man, what you mean is paid in full? And he told me that my father had came in on Wednesday and paid my bill through Friday. That's what Jesus was doing. Jesus was paying our bill in full.
Y'all, I'm about to get up from this chair and run.
Yes, sir.
I tell you.
I'm about to pull over and run.
Let me tell you what. Captain Moore, God bless you. So glad to have you with us. Just give us a minute or two of your story. Where you from? How'd you get called into the ministry? And where you're pastoring right now, if you would.
Well, my name is Octavia, Captain Octavia Moore. I'm from Chicago, Illinois, the South Side. The Carter Temple CME Church in Chicago, Illinois is where I came into the CME Church. I was invited to church by a friend. My pastor at the time was Bishop Williamson. He would go and volunteer at the school, one church, one school. And I followed him from the school to the church. And that prolific partnership, that partnership that went where the latchkey kids were, it changed my life. And those members who came and read at the church. From there, in Carter Temple, it just wasn't Bishop Williamson, Bishop Sylvester Williams was my pastor during my teenage years. I was licensed and ordained by Bishop Graves in the First Episcopal District. I received my first church my sophomore year of college. Bishop Graves is very near and dear to me. He was a great bishop, a great leader. And from there, I went from Tennessee to Atlanta to the Phillips School of Theology in Atlanta, Georgia. It was there I started pastoring in Sparta, Georgia. From there, I was sent to a situation in Oklahoma City. I stayed there a total of 5 years, and then I sessioned into active duty chaplaincy for the United States Army. And I tell you, one thing I can say is that God definitely orders our steps, and I know that I am right where I'm supposed to be. Other than that, I'm very grateful for the elders, the mentors. That's a picture of my family. That's my husband and my bonus son, David. My husband is Aaron. And we got married last year, September. And so if there's anything else you want to know, you can inbox me and maybe I'll answer it. But that's all I have for my 1 minute.
That's good. It's just a delight to have you and see you blossoming and doing your work, your call, and representing our country at the same time. And we're going to be back with you momentarily. At this time, we want to share with Pastor Naya Royal. Before I bring her up, let me share this.
And then the final thing is the responsibility to our future. What would happen if Ishbi-Benob killed David? What happens if nobody steps up? What happens if nobody gets involved or steps into the cause? The light of Jehovah, the light of God goes out. And we can't afford for the light of Jehovah to go out. The light of Jehovah didn't start with us, and it surely isn't going to end with us.
Amen. We can't afford for the light to go out. Pastor Royal, so delighted to have you here with us. Would you tell us a little bit about your story, where you are, and your journey to your church and your call to the ministry?
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much for this invitation. I have been CME my whole life. I grew up in Ripley, Ohio, which is about an hour east of Cincinnati. I am a proud member of the 2nd Episcopal District under presiding prelate Bishop Marvin Frank Thomas. And I attended, my hometown church was Beebe Chapel CME Church, which is where I now pastor. After I graduated here locally, I attended Lane College, which is a CME institution in Jackson, Tennessee. There I played basketball for 4 years. I also ran cross country and played tennis for the Dragons as well. Once I graduated from Lane, I went directly to graduate school. I attended the University of Louisville and received my Master's of Business Administration there. And then I got into the workforce. I accepted my calling as a local preacher when I was in college at Lane College. And then prior to the pandemic, I accepted my calling to be a local deacon. My pastor that pastored me throughout my whole lifetime at Beebe recently retired. And so the presiding elder had a discussion with myself, and I had decided to basically step up and become pastor of my hometown church. So it's been really a full circle experience. But it's been really blessed. And, being a pastor is a lot of responsibility, but just the reward has been just an extreme blessing.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much. So delighted to have you and to learn of your CME connections as well. And we look forward to returning back to you in just a few moments. I want to now bring up Pastor Joquan Kinsey. But before I do that, let's take a look at this.
Lord.
My brother.
Hello, hello.
What a beautiful gift. What a beautiful, beautiful voice. I tell you. Pastor Kinsey, tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, I am Joquan Kinsey, and I was born here in Waterbury, Connecticut. That's where I am right now. I'm a part of the 7th Episcopal District, but I'm being used as a supply pastor in Anniston right now, Alabama, at Murray Temple CME Church. I'm also a graduate of Miles College. I got my music degree there, and now I'm trying to, sharpen my tools up even more so at the Phillips School of Theology at the ITC in Atlanta. So my plate's pretty full right now, so I need all the prayers that I could get.
Oh, man, I can only imagine. And you traveled to Connecticut on yesterday. Yes. To be ordained. Tell us about that moment for you.
Yes, it was really kind of like a full circle moment because I got the chance to come back home for it.
Yes.
It was here in Connecticut. And so I got to see my people again, of course. And our preacher was the President Dean, Paul Brown, who preached an amazing message about remaining faithful to the call. And it was just an amazing experience. And it was great to be in the church again because, we've been apart for so long, but they had it nice and spaced out for us. And they had everything that we needed. And it was just a great, amazing time.
Oh, I bet it was. And typically when Dean Brown preaches, he unloosens the tie and he pulls his jacket off, all of those pulpit theatrics he does well. He's a powerful preacher though. But congratulations to you. And it's an awesome responsibility to having been ordained and elevated as an elder of our church. We're going to be back with you in just a moment. It is my delight to present to you the Reverend Andrea Brayboy, who's going to come and tell us a little bit about her pastoral journey. But before that, take a look.
Jesus has had an active ministry. Jesus has had an active ministry up until this point. My apologies. Give me a second. Sorry, that was our free conference call line. Jesus had an active ministry up until this point, and he had healed the sick, he fed the multitude, he had healed the boy that was possessed, that the 12 disciples couldn't heal, and he had even mediated their petty little arguments. So Jesus was actively working, but in this chapter we see a turn, we see a change. He's now preparing to go to the cross, similar as to what we're symbolically honoring right now in Lenten season. He is on his way to the cross, and he has stated that. And in this chapter, we see his ministry change. He's still doing active ministry, but he's preparing everybody for what's about to come.
Thank you, Reverend Brayboy. Welcome. So delighted to have you with us. And tell us a little bit about your pastoral journey, please.
Dr. Skip, I love that scene because the pandemic has caused us to wear so many hats. And that's a perfect scene of what ministry is like right now. Sorry. Again, I'm Andrea Brayboy. I'm a lifelong member at Amos Temple CME Church in Riverside, California, from the 9th Episcopal District. My bishop is Bishop Paul A.G. Stewart. My parents walked me into Amos Temple when I was about 6 months old, my mom and my dad, and that's my home. I've had a long journey. I've had a long period of self-discovery, finding out and building a relationship with Jesus on my own versus my parents' Jesus, my grandmother's Jesus, and finding Jesus and building that relationship one-on-one. I received the call to ministry at 19 years of age, and I just told God no. I flat out said, nope, I'm not doing that. So I ran for many, many, many years. And ultimately, I got to a place where I was on my knees and I had nowhere to go. And so I looked up and I had to really use the faith and the word that was put in me to believe that God could deliver me and move me out of the situation that I was in. And he's been faithful to that. I became an exhorter in 2007, and then still had some trouble accepting it, being young, being a single mother. So I came back around recently, and everything has moved fast and exponentially. I was ordained a traveling deacon in 2019. Both of my boys graduated high school in 2019. I graduated undergrad in 2019, and 2 months later I was ordained in the church. So it was one of those years, and I just continue to move forward and serve my church, and I'm just grateful to be here with everybody today. But I do want to disclose, though, to be honest, I'm glad you did the generational segments. I am Generation X, so I am going to sit and listen to what our Generation Y and Zers have to say today. Thank you so much.
You are very welcome. Thank you. And we are always glad to have a Generation Xer here. When Pastor Kinsey was speaking, I failed to share a few photos, but let me put a few up of this great preacher and pastor that is doing great work at Murray and Anniston. Amen. I had to dig deep on some of y'all Facebook pages and thank you all for complying, all of you who did, except for Andre Lloyd, but that's my mama's pastor. So at any rate, we found some pictures of him. Y'all know Lloyd. Next, I'm delighted to present my classmate and friend, and the one who even in school always carried himself like an Episcopal leader. I speak of none other than the Reverend Leon F. Parker. But before that, let me share this with you.
We can't grow a congregation to 100 if we don't appreciate the 10. We can't disciple for 100 if we can't effectively prepare and teach the 40. You should look again, church, because it's in our little. It's in our limited resources. It's in our small beginnings. It's in our lacking that God does his very best work. Number 3, and I'm getting ready to go home. See abundance.
Isn't that what all CME preachers say after they preach for 30 minutes or so? And getting close and close and close again. Pastor Parker, welcome, my friend. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Dr. Mason.
You are very welcome. Tell us about your journey in ministry.
Well, my journey in ministry is similar to that of the Reverend Chaplain Octavia Chanel Moore, in that I found Christ and I found the CME Church in the 3rd grade on the south side of Chicago, where my home church was Carter Temple CME Church. But it was through the program One Church, One School that played a pivotal role in the south side of Chicago in the late 90s, or as they say, the 99 to the 2000s, that the men and women of Carter Temple, and particularly our pastor at the time, Bishop Henry M. Williamson Sr., came to the school to address some gang and drug violence issues. He sent an invitation, a simple invitation to come to Carter Temple. I was in 3rd grade. I woke up that following Sunday. I snuck out of the house, found myself a block down the street at Carter Temple. That particular Sunday, I joined the church. The next Sunday, I brought my family, and they joined the church, and the rest was history. And so I give credit to Bishop Williamson, but also to my pastor during my teenage years, Bishop Sylvester Williams. And after that, I went to the greatest HBCU on earth, Miles College in Birmingham, Alabama. Graduated from there, went on to the ITC in Atlanta, Georgia. I had an opportunity to serve in several churches and several positions throughout my ministry. And now I'm the proud pastor of the St. Luke CME Church in Nashville, Tennessee. Over 19 years in ministry, 10 years in pastoring, and 5 at the beautiful St. Luke in Nashville.
Awesome, Pastor Parker. We are so proud and so happy for the great work that you're doing, and we look forward to returning back to you and sharing with you in just a few moments. The next preacher pastor that we're going to present is the Reverend Zachary Mullens, but before we do that, permit me to share this clip.
The problem with your life is not that you're going through, but because you put your issues in the wrong hands. Calling on Enroll and calling on your best friend. Your best friend can only encourage you, but Jesus is the one who can handle your situation. Nothing changed until the bread and the fish got in Jesus' hand. It was just a 2-fish dinner from Miami Grill until it got in Jesus' hand. No sickness is insurmountable until it gets in Jesus' hand.
Oh my. Look how Pastor Zach is doing a 360 circumference and making sure that everybody is getting the word. I love that. Pastor Zach, welcome. Welcome.
Hello.
Glad to have you.
Glad to be here.
Thank you, my brother. Tell us about your journey in the ministry of the CME Church.
Well, good evening to each of you. My journey begins at my home church in Chicago Heights, Illinois, which is a south suburb of Chicago, there at the St. James CME Church. Was a CME my whole life. My grandmother, my grandfather were both CME there in Pickens and Camden, Mississippi. So CME runs deep in my blood. I went on to pastor the J. Claude Allen CME Church, which is also located in the south suburb of Chicago. At the age of 17, I began pastoring there, and God allowed us to serve there for 3 years. And then Bishop Sylvester Williams Sr. called me to serve the Jameson Memorial CME Church here in St. Louis. And when I served there 3 years, and God gave us a vision to merge Jameson and Parish Stewart. And now we are the Rebirth CME Church, comprising of about 120 members here in the St. Louis metropolitan area. I would be remiss if I didn't give God praise for a few instrumental persons in my ministry walk, that being Reverend W.J.G. McGlynn, Reverend Dr. Janice Smith, Reverend Dr. Essie Clark George, Bishop Paul A.G. Stewart Sr., and my bishop now, who serves as more than a bishop, but a mentor, Bishop Sylvester Williams Sr. So we give God praise. That's me and my beautiful wife that God sent me here to get in St. Louis, and my 3 children, Talia, Tia, and Tobias. So to God be the glory.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor Zach, and such a beautiful family as well. Last but certainly not least is the Reverend Andre C. Lloyd Jr. But before I bring him up, take a look at this.
The only way people are going to come back to church, and the only way they're coming back to God, is if we create an environment that allows their demons to flee away from them. The only way people come back to church and back to God is when we create an atmosphere of worship. When we create an atmosphere that allows people to shout, that will allow people to run, that will allow people to dance, that will allow people to lift up on their hands, that will allow people to fall prostrate before the altar, that will allow the people to bring their offering without judging what's on their offering.
Let me present my mama's pastor, the Reverend Andrea C. Lloyd. Pastor Lloyd, can you hear me?
Hey, man, what's going on?
I'm good, brother. So glad to have you on with us. And if you would, take a moment to share a little bit about your journey in the ministry.
Man, my journey in the ministry is a lot similar to, just about everyone that's on with us today. My journey began at the Bethel CME Church in Macon, Georgia, where, I had about 3 pastors at the time, Reverend Donald Jordan, who pastored me majority of my life. And then we had Reverend E.D. Hooks, who's gone on to be with the Lord. And after that, we had, the Reverend Dr. Curtis L. West Jr., which allowed me to kind of move my ministry in a sense. All of my pastors indicated that there was a call they believed that was on my life, and several other persons in the church who believed that God had called me to do things, and I ran from it. So I hid in the media booth, and it was the late Henry R. Delaney, who was doing revival, who called me out of the audio booth, and he said to me that your hands are made for more. And it was at that moment that I decided, that God had called me in the ministry. And again, still kind of running from the pastoral ministry, running from the preaching ministry. It was my father in ministry, the Reverend Dr. Curtis L. West, as well as Bishop Otho H. Lakey, who was my bishop at the time. They said to me, son, if you're going to be anything in this church, if you're going to be a leader in this church, you've got to go to the greatest school that produces leaders for the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, and that is the Lane College in Jackson, Tennessee. And so that stuck with me even as I tried to avoid it. But while I was there at Lane, the late Bishop Henry Graves sent me to substitute one Sunday at a church, and then he told me to call him when I got home, and I did. And he said to me, "How did you like the people?" And I said, "Oh, they were okay." He said, "Well, they say you're okay too, so you're gonna be their pastor." So I was like, "Oh wow!" So I got through into the fire of pastoring it, and I thank Bishop Graves for that, and then just able to be a part of the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church and being exposed to it on on all levels, from my then Bishop Kenneth W. Carter, who gave me an opportunity to travel and work alongside him as his assistant in Haiti. And so I got to see the mission of the CME Church abroad, man, and it was just awesome opportunity. And then to my non-bishop, Bishop Thomas L. Brown, who gives me opportunity to serve as the Dean of Christian Leadership School, to pass down, how others have, blessed me in my young life. Now I had the opportunity to do the same for the young people. So, man, I'm excited about, the future of the CME Church. I'm more excited about being among, all of these other young preachers and pastors and leaders. It gives me hope that indeed our Zion is in good hands.
Thank you, my brother, and thank all of you. We had to hear a little bit of your story in order to have some perspective. Now, unmute yourselves, and I'm going to do a first round of questions. If you don't mind, would you tell me your age, Reverend Brayboy?
Oh.
You can give me a ballpark.
Oh, wow.
If you don't want to tell me the exact age, just give me a ballpark figure. I'm between what and what?
No, I put it this way. I have aged out of the young adult group by 7 years now.
We'll take that. Pastor Zach, how old are you?
We just come out with the strong questions first.
We're coming out very strong.
I'm 26.
26. Pastor Parker?
35.
Captain Moore?
No, I'm really 33. I said 35.
You've always been acting old, guy.
That old lying preacher.
I'm 33.
Okay.
Forever holding on 21.
I hear you, sweetheart. All right. Pastor Kinsey?
I'm 24. I'll be 25 in June.
Okay. Pastor Royal?
I am 26.
All right. And Pastor Lloyd?
I am 33.
33. My goodness. Well, these are wonderful. So let me ask you, how many of you preached today? All right, Pastor Zach, what was your sermon today?
It was entitled "It's Time to Do Something" out of Luke 10:30 through 37, dealing with the killing of our Black boys and girls in America.
Okay, all right. Who else preached today? Pastor Parker?
Yes, we preached, raising the question, what is your net worth? Coming from the Gospel of John, the 21st chapter, 1 through 10, as part 2 of our sermon series entitled, Therefore Go.
Okay. Who else preached today? Anybody else? Pastor Kinsey?
I preached Bathe It Away from John chapter 5, starting at verse 1 to verse 14, talking about the man at the sheep gate by the pool of Bethesda. Even though he didn't get into the water, I said that God will not only make us well, but he'll make us into a well. Just reminding us that even though we think that we need that type of water, we already have the living water inside of us.
Amen. Did anybody else preach today? Pastor Royal?
I did not preach today. Actually, I retired. My previous pastor, he basically assists me now.
Okay. And so the rest of you all were on paid vacation today.
No, I preach.
You preach, Pastor Lloyd. What did you preach?
The blessing of the pandemic is you can be in two places at one time.
The blessing of the pandemic. Wow. So this brings my first question. And to those of you listening, I understand there may be a little technical difficulty on Facebook because a part of the video I used to talk about Generation X was blocked. But don't worry about it. We're going to post the whole video on Facebook. And also you'll get to see it for those of you, some of you who may have been kicked out. How important is it, my first question to you, that you're preaching relevant topics? Do you watch the news? I know you're aware of what's going on, but is that important to you that when you do preach or teach, okay, that you are relevant, or do you preach the lectionary regardless of what's going on? Anybody can chime in and jump in. How important is that to you?
Well, I think it's very, very important for those of you who journey with us at the ITC. We learned that the great theologian Karl Barth teaches us that we should have our Bibles and our newspapers in our hands. And then there's a song that we sing in the church raising the question how to reach the masses. And so while I do preach sometimes from the lectionary, I think it's always important that we make sure that we are preaching a relevant and prophetic word to touch lives, to meet needs, but to also glorify God. And so in this season of change, in this season of pandemic and politicians and all the things that's going on in our society, it's very, very important that we make sure that we are lifting up a ready prophetic word that will bless God's people and encourage them, give them hope in these times.
Amen. Anybody else?
I have to agree with Pastor Parker.
Yes.
Recalling when I was a youth, I remember, listening to the message of the pastor or guest preachers and really wanted to understand, how does this relate to me? What can I do when I leave this church? How can I, put this into my everyday life? So I tend to try to, speak about what's going on and what's relevant to what's going on today in the world.
Good. Very good. Very good. Now, all of you preach. Any of you teach Bible study as well, or do you have somebody else teaching Bible study? All of you teach Bible study? Okay. Very good. Very good. How are you? What's going on with you personally? As it relates to, we've had 3 police killings this week. We've had the mass shooting. Even though we have change in the White House and it appears to be positive change, I mean, how are you feeling as a preacher, as a pastor, doing all that's going on? Anybody just jump in.
This is a safe space, right?
It's a safe space.
All right.
I'm tired.
You're tired.
I'm tired. I'm exhausted.
Yeah. Anybody else feel that way too?
Mm-hmm. The reason I say that, man, is because, I have, as a leisure, as a thing that helped me cope with ministry, a self-care thing, I have become a gun collector.
Okay.
I like them. I Reverend Lindsay, please stop giving them. Reverend Lindsay is telling a false truth with her face. But now I don't feel that I can do that safely anymore, because if someone see, the fact that I'm a collector of guns, even though I have a constitutional right, I've done the necessary steps to secure that constitutional right, I just don't think it would be fair for me to carry something versus one of my other counterparts who doesn't look like me.
Reverend Brayboy, how are you feeling? How are you coping during this pandemic?
I echo Pastor Lloyd's statements. I'm extremely tired. Our house is, I preach the gospel and support the church. My husband is law enforcement. So we've been caught in the middle for many years. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So our dynamic has been very interesting, probably since the Trayvon verdict came in. Initially, our conversations, he looks at things from an acute eye, watching how the use of force has been deployed, how they set up their belts. He looks at it from a tactical perspective.
Sure.
I look at it from an emotional perspective, being a mother of two young African-American boys. And then we have his coworkers, which is a whole nother thing, as everybody knows. So it's an interesting dynamic, and I've had to really hone in on my faith just to get through day by day. Not even just to get through. I also write policy for the government. So just to be able to face my job, to be able to face conversations with my coworkers and my peers and colleagues, to be able to stand in front of the people and proclaim God's goodness and his justice in the midst of it all is taxing. And then on top of it all, being the person to bring the media together to try to keep your church together in the middle of a pandemic while we have all this social unrest going on. So right now on every side, I feel like I'm being pressed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. I'm sure everybody echoes those sentiments, but God is making a way out of no way, and he keeps doing it. But long story short, I'm very, very tired.
Yeah. Captain Moore, what about you? You're on the base. Are you on the base? Tell us how you're coping, how you are encouraging and ministering to those of your fellow military.
My particular ministry context is at the hospital.
It's at the hospital. Okay.
Specifically a hospital chaplain. And we have a wide range of people who, from DoD civilians to military to families, military personnel to families. In terms of services I provide, a lot of it is the same as the church. The ministry of presence is paramount. Not only the ministry of presence, but when we do say something, we make sure that we have something encouraging to say.
Right.
Because when people come to the hospital, they're pretty much at their lowest point, and we were always taught, as our professor told us, Howard Thurman said, meet people at their ashtray level. So it's our intention, it's my intention to always meet people where they are and journey alongside them. I believe that I am a co-journeyer to someone's healing. And so I deal with a lot of different issues, PTSD, moral injury, sexual trauma. Some of them are issues of, the elderly, You'll be surprised how much happens to the elderly. This pandemic was not good to quite a bit of them, and they are afraid. And so dealing with people and talking with them through their fears of never perhaps seeing their grandchildren anymore, then the fears of the pandemic, getting the shot and still getting sick. And so I purposefully position myself to help, to encourage, to pray, to be whatever I believe it was Paul who said, be all things to all people. Because at the end of the day, we are the hands and feet. And so that is my context. I agree with Pastor Lloyd. I'm tired, I'm tired. I admire all of you all who pastor in the traditional sense, because I know how hard it was for me, especially my last year to raise that $20,000. So I admire any of you all who are going to these churches and not physically meeting, and still it says something about you. That people are still invested. And not only that, and hopefully they're taking care of you. So I also go see my therapist. I love Jesus and my therapist. I think that everyone should. In hindsight, I probably should have been seeing a therapist long before. I probably should have took a year sabbatical, probably, for some of the stuff that had happened to me. So I just encourage people to make sure that their self-care regimen includes someone who is certified. I'm not talking about no pity patter online degree having. I'm talking about someone who is certified, family therapist, counselor. Go to the nearest clinic. They even got they got a Black therapist app. I think you need to have someone who has something in common with you.
That's good.
So flush out those issues, and they really won't be taking against you. Y'all have.
Yeah, that's good. So how have you? Thank you. So now technology hits you, slap you in the face quick. Now, many of you already had, I guess, some virtual ministries that you were already doing, but you have had to up your game, and many of you have gotten very creative, very fancy. You got professional AV people, you got videos. I'm not calling out any names, but I know what you've been doing. I don't know where y'all getting the money to do all of that, but at any rate, you're doing it. You're doing it well, but do you just feel the need? Do you feel the need? Do you feel the need that you just got to put on the best technological production? Is that putting? Let me ask this quick. Is it adding extra pressure? I say that because there's a preacher, very well-known preacher in Atlanta. I'm gonna call his name out, Dr. Timothy McDonald. Reverend McDonald is, one of the civil rights voices. He's an activist and so forth. And he has a great church, First Iconium, and certainly probably has a great AV team. But what he does on Sunday is sit at his kitchen table with his Bible on Facebook Live. No fancy graphics, none of what we're doing, yourself included, and trying to up the game. And he just does that. And it does become tiring sometimes to constantly be in motion. So how has your technological game been? Leon Parker, let me start with you.
I'll tell a quick story. God led us to go into a capital campaign about 2 or 3 years ago. I didn't want to go into one. Before I came to the current church I'm serving, we had just knocked down a building, merged, and remodeled in 1 year. So when I got to Tennessee, I was not looking to do any kind of upgrades or remodeling, but God put it on my heart to do it. And so we pushed through it. We had 2 years worth of conversation before anything started. We ordered the equipment December of 19. It was on back order till about June or July. The pandemic came in March. No, we had a tornado the beginning of March, and then the pandemic hit. A week before the pandemic hit, all of our technology equipment arrived at the church in order for us to do ministry. So I say that, I tell that story to say that it was nothing but God leading us to that direction. Yeah. And now that we've gone through the pandemic, we've learned that it's now essential to have technology as both a way to reach those who are virtual and those who will come back and those who decided we're not going anywhere, we're coming to church each and every Sunday. The other part of that is, I think when it comes to our context in the CME church, it has pushed us. The pandemic has pushed us. The pastor you mentioned, he's probably been doing that for years, technology, all those things that you mentioned. But for us, I think it pushed us to really take hold of what the Great Commission calls us to do. And technology is the easy way to do what Matthew 28:16 through 20 charges all of us to go into the entire world. So why not lean into it, right? Why not embrace it? And so we're excited that we use a intergenerational approach of involving the entire ministry to get involved and to make sure that we're touching lives and meeting needs.
That's great. And you've done a great job of it. And I guess all of us have felt pushed. I was on Reverend Brayboy's looking through some of her pictures, and she has double computers set up, and as she teaches, this is what we're doing now. And if we don't meet the demand and the task, we're going to fall way behind. Now, of course, I think Zach Mullens, he, I don't know who does his flyers. He has a different flyer up every day, not every week, every day.
I can't keep up.
I can't keep up either, but he's doing great work. Zach, tell us about Pastor Zach, excuse me. Tell us how you had to meet the demands and meet this moment.
Well, let me say who does them. I do them. And I've learned and taught myself how to do them out of necessity. One of the things I heard my good friend, hometown brother say that it's pushed us, but it's also, from a young pastor's perspective, given us permission. A lot of the things that we are utilizing now, we've been trying to get congregations to utilize for years. And what the pandemic didn't give us a choice. And so, when we talk about video editing and we talk about streaming and video equipment and AV equipment, all of these things we probably have had on our church conference agenda for 5 years. And what the pandemic came in and did was make us vote yes. Yeah. So when we talk about, the necessity of AV, when we talk about the necessity of video editing and producing, my thing is this: when we were in person, we wanted the best plexiglass or wood pulpit. We wanted the best organ and best piano. Some churches wanted the best carpet, worship chairs, all that stuff you needed to have a good in-person worship experience. And then, so we should transition that mindset to this time of social distance. If you want to give your best to Christ, you need to present yourself in the best light. And so it's going to take investing in good equipment, good video editing, and different things of that nature if we want to truly reach who we say we want to reach.
Amen. So let me shift for just a second now. Okay. Now we're going to talk about our church, the CME church. Okay. And I have some questions that I want to put up, and I want you to respond to it. My first question is, some in leadership have stated, well, let me go to this first question. As a young adult, if you had the authority, what change or changes would you make immediately to the polity of the CME church? Anybody want to, first of all, you want to just meditate on that for a second?
No.
And if you're ready to respond, and let me read it to Andre. As a young adult, if you had the authority, what change or changes would you make immediately to the polity of the CME church? Anybody want to shoot? Go.
I'm going to say the itinerancy.
Talk about
I have pastored for about 11 years now. And what I've learned in pastoring is that to really be a true, effective, and trusted pastor, you need to be with those people for at least 2 years. Statistics tell us you really don't become the pastor until after the 5th through 7th year. So for me, if I was to change something within the polity of our church, it would be the itinerant ministry. I would push for extending terms, especially if you're planted and you're doing well in a local congregation, to extend the life of the itinerancy at least a quadrennial.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Let me. I agree with Pastor Parker. And it's not really, if we all want to be honest, it's not really a change so much that we would need to make as far as our itinerary is concerned. We would probably just need to put more emphasis. There's a section in the discipline that gives the bishops the authority to give multi-year appointments where they see fit. Now, the only thing that, the discipline clearly states from my interpretation is that a bishop cannot extend appointment beyond a quadrennial. But our bishops have the authority to give multi-year appointments. And that's one of the things I would bring, not really change, but bring to the forefront, is that you take a look at, like Reverend Parker is saying, you just take a look at some of our congregations, speak with some of our congregations, and let's figure out, which of those congregations needs a pastor who doesn't have his or her eyes set on the next big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Who's worried about pastoring where they are and making where they are the next big thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very good. Anybody else want to jump in or make a comment on that?
Well, I wanted to say that when you look at the younger generations, they're really connected. They're socially connected. They're connected through technology. They have constant means of contact with their friends in their circle. So it's hard to talk about itineracy and talk about reaching and growing the younger generations when these relationships get abruptly disbanded.
Yeah.
And I don't see that being a tool for growth, especially when we're looking at Generation Z, the things that they need, the things that they want, the things that they desire. They're really big on having that interpersonal connection, especially with their pastor or any leaders, teachers.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that they seek in studies. So I think I agree with both of them that this needs to be revisited if we're looking at growth and if we're looking at retention. We're looking at people acclimating with the church and growing with the church. Then we need to look at growing and sustaining relationships so that people can have that history and they can know that they can count on their pastor or their leader to be there with them as their life changes.
Mm-hmm.
And the pastor can also feel supported by his church because those relationships are cultivated. And then that way it's reciprocated, right? Because there's also, let's look at the other end. Let's look at the pastoral end where they don't know where they're going. And sometimes as individuals, we're hesitant to extend that olive branch to build a substantial relationship, a significant relationship, because you don't know if you're going to be gone the next minute. So we need to build it on both ends so that everybody can feel safe and grow together.
I tell you, I so agree with you. Let me ask Pastor Kinsey, Pastor Royal, Pastor Zach, our 20-ish preachers on this panel. The question came, in your opinion, what can the local church do to be more appealing to young adults? And you are a young adult, and you're also pastoring a church. And Pastor Roy, in your case, you are pastoring your home church, the church that you grew up in. So any of you jump in. Pastor Roy, you want to begin?
Sure. I think it goes back to what we previously discussed, is the relationship. I think a lot of times I've had my church personally, I've had relationships with my congregation, but I do feel I was under watch care, and some churches treated young people like, trophies on a shelf. We'll pull you down when it's time for Connectional Youth and Young Adult Week, or we want you active when it's time for Connectional Youth and Young Adult Conference. But then as a young person, you kind of feel like I'm just a number, like why I'm not included in, other activities besides when you need young people for these specific events.
Mm-hmm.
More young people would be, more appealing to, be be okay with, hey, I'll do this for the church. I'll step up to the plate if, you know, it was for somebody who took interest in me. You know, the way my mom raised me, it was, if an elder asks you to do something, it's point blank period. You know, you do it. Yes, ma'am. What do you need? Yes, sir. But I think the way, you know, some of my younger siblings, it's, you know, you have to put investment in me for me to want to, you know, do something for you.
Mm-hmm. Pastor Kinsey?
One thing I would say is what I've seen is that we don't really take our music ministry that serious in our church. And one thing that I can see is that if the music is, for lack of better, hidden the right way, if the music is hidden just right, it will. When I was working as a choir director, I saw that if the music is done the right way, it tills the land the right way, so that seed can be planted. And so what happens is
it tills the land the right way. I like that. Yeah.
If we aren't singing the right way, or if we don't have the proper music, and not saying that it has to be the new school contemporary gospel or praise and worship music, but the instrumentalists, the people who are playing the instruments, as well as who are singing, if they aren't connecting and worshiping in the right way, or have the right and proper sound is also very important. If they don't have the right sound and it's not a distracting sound, I feel like that's a good way to appeal to the young adults and keep them and sustain them, and also make sure they're there during the decision-making processes, because we like Reverend said, that we leave them out. We use them as trophies, put them on up on the wall, and when it's time to show them off, it's time to show them off.
Mm-hmm.
But why aren't they there when it's time to make the decisions for what the church is going to do? Mostly we put those decisions up on the older people of the church, because they bring in the money. But they can also, the young people have money too nowadays. And so if we put the idea in their mind that they have a say in it, maybe they'll put something else behind it.
Great. Thank you. Pastor Zach, someone asked, is the local church accepting a young adult serving on the official board? And if not, how can we change this? This is something that Pastor Kinsey has referenced. And as a pastor or assistant pastor, are you ensuring that you have young people very active in leadership positions in the churches or ministries that you pastor, that you over?
I'll chime in there. I think it's essential that we utilize and we empower all that we have, every member that we have. Right. I think we can't ignore the fact that when the majority of these fellow young preachers were sharing their story, none of them said they stayed or joined their church because they had screens, lights, all of the theatrics. They joined their church because they were seen and they were empowered consistently. And we've got to learn how to be a source of seeing people. There's so many young people that join our church who may not be seen at home, may not be seen in their schools, and they're looking for people to see them and to empower them to speak life into their dreams and in their goals. And so if I was to join these two questions together, how to connect with young adults, but also our churches open? We got to make churches open. And I want to share this harsh reality. The majority of our official boards will not be here in the next 30 years. If I'm the preacher that gets in trouble for admitting that, the majority of our church will not be here, or they will not be able to serve actively in the next 30 years. So when we ask the question, do we have young adults on our official board? The question should be, or the statement should be, we better go ahead and find our way to put them on there, because we're going to need them sooner than later. And I believe it takes the empowerment and the encouragement and the undergirding of them and their lives to accomplish that.
Dr. Mason,
yes.
a lot
Reverend
of the principles and training that I received on the south side of Chicago, Carter Temple, I've taken with me everywhere I've gone.
Okay.
Before I became a young adult, we were on every ministry and board. We were called junior stewards, junior trustees. You know, we just didn't go in the room and observe the counting of the money. We were counting the money.
Right.
We didn't just stand next to the senior stewards who were holding the back. We were holding the basket. The point is that the proverb, train up a child of scripture in the way that they should go, that when they get older, they shall not depart, is really why I'm still a part of the church today.
That's right.
The grounding that we receive.
Yes.
We talk about ministry. We talk about being called. We talk about being seen as not just young adult children, youth, young adults, and adults, right? It was the men and women who understood the importance of intergenerational ministry, because they knew that at some point they had to give up their positions. At some point they were going to glory, but they did not want the legacy and the history and the ministry of the local church to go down. And so they believed vision to see, faith to believe, courage to do what was important to sustain the souls of the individuals, but also the church. And as a result, God got the glory, and you saw the blessings generationally after generation after generation. And so I'm excited. I use those same principles in my local church, wherever I'm called to serve. Because I know if there's no children, if there are no youth and young adults, there will be no future of the church.
Sounds like those principles were embedded deeply into you. And I saw Chaplain Moore echoing and mouthing those same words. So we understand the great teaching. So this is a question for all of you. And I'm going to ask Chaplain Moore to chime in. What are you all looking for in the next Episcopal leaders? I think we have 13 at the present who have offered themselves for the Episcopal leadership. And so, look, and they're all good people, good preachers, good pastors. So in your mind, what distinguishes one over the other? Go ahead, jump right in it.
Go ahead and jump in and just be honest. And I'm going to preference my answer with honesty. I would like to see someone who cares, who's invested, someone who has a good credit score, portfolio of investment, someone who brings more to the church than what we have. Someone who can open different doors, someone who is not only faithful, but someone who is courageous enough to make the swift moves that need to be made. When we talk about Episcopal leaders, you know, I look at this title and I look at how the church was founded, the 41 ex-slaves. I look at the age of those who were bishops. They were younger. They didn't have to wait until they were much older. And one could ask, well, why was that? There was some wisdom in that. Also, you know, when I look for an Episcopal leader, I look at how they handle their personal affairs. That's right. I said it. And I'm being honest about it. I need to make sure that I'm not dealing with somebody who can't manage their personal finances. Make sure that I'm not dealing with somebody who their morals, they're not taking care of their families. Mm-hmm. And so just being honest, you know, when we talk about, hey, I want to offer myself to the episcopacy, how have you offered yourself to the church? How have you been present for the church? How have you pushed for the church? Who else have you helped except yourself? Is going to always be my question. Who else can vouch and say a good word? Some of the people who's on this call, we've been brothers and sisters since we was 5, 6. Some of us went to college together. Some of us know each other. But I need to make sure, look, let the works that they've done speak for them. And I don't want a Johnny come lately, and I also don't want somebody. You know, it should be a limit. Talk about polity. I want to go back to that question. You should only be able to run a couple of times. You shouldn't be able to run every 20th time we have an election. So if that's part of the polity, I said what I said. That's part of the polity. That needs to change. It should be a cap. on the will of the people. The church has spoken. This shouldn't be let me throw my hat in the race because this is the highest you can go in the church, and I might as well be it since I've been around. No, you got to be called. So that's all I got to say.
And you have said a mouthful, my sister. You have said a mouthful. Y'all come on, chime in. What are you looking for?
That's what
Andrea, go ahead, Zach.
That's what Chicago gets you,
Y'all Chicago folks are too much. I didn't realize I had 3 of y'all up on here today. My Lord. I tell you. Andre, what are you looking for in the next Episcopal leaders?
Well, I've kind of got to, I piggyback on what my sister Octavia has said. I think for me, being a pastor, a bishop is a pastor's pastor. In a sense, and so for me, being a pastor, being a young pastor, and being wanting to be with the church and wanting to stick around and see the church go to the next level, I want to see somebody who is who's authentic, like Reverend Liz just said, someone who walks the walk and not only talk the talk, but just be authentic and be true to yourself as well as true to the church, like she said. I'm not saying that any of the candidates that we have right now are not authentic. A level of authenticity, because when you think about young adults, when you think about young people, our next Episcopal leaders must be authentic, because one thing, civil rights generation, if they don't think you're being authentic, if they don't think you're creating policies that benefit them, the civil rights generation gonna fight. They're gonna fight. They're gonna march. They're gonna, in the church, they're gonna raise hell. They're gonna throw their discipline at you until you do what they say do. This young generation, they're not gonna fight you if you're not authentic. If you're not creating policies and procedures that will ensure the lifeblood of our church, this younger generation say that's fine. We'll just go find it somewhere else. So they're gonna fight. They're gonna flee. And I think a part of a lot of us young adults fleeing or shying away from the church has a lot to do with leadership not being as authentic as they can and or should be.
Yes. Anybody else?
Yeah, let me jump in.
Go ahead, Pastor Zach.
I also think there needs to be a genuine and healthy love for the church that lies in the heart of an Episcopal leader. And I said healthy because Ike said he loved Tina, but you see how that turned out. I don't want you to just say you in love with me and with the church, but I want you to show it with your signs. And when you really have a love for the church, you won't hurt the church intentionally. When you have a love for the church, you also have a love for God's people, God's preachers, and God's lay people. And so what that means is if I know that a pastor is not operating in the lifestyle that he or she should be operating, I'm not just going to take them from one place and move them to another and hope that the skeletons from the last closet don't meet them at the front door. But I'm going to help them get the help they need in order for them to further do ministry in the future, or to really reflect on if they've called to this thing in the first place. I just use that as an example to say that if you're offering yourself as a bishop in the church, you've got to really love this thing. You've got to be in love with this thing, because when you are truly, and when you have healthy love for the church, it shows in your demeanor, it shows in your actions, it shows in your decision making. I just want to say this, give you this quick story. I have not always had pastors who saw me, but I've always had a bishop who saw me. So even when my pastor didn't see me, my bishop saw me, my bishop supported me, my bishop encouraged me, my bishop empowered me. And that's the power of an Episcopal leader, that sometimes you got to look beyond the faults of your leaders and see what your leaders can't see for the betterment of the church. Because I'm gonna leave it right there. But you got to love the church, and you've got to love God's people.
Thank you. Anybody else want to chime in? Okay, so then why don't we have candidates who are in their 30s? I'm looking at the discipline right now.
You want to be honest with?
No, hold on.
I'm gonna do you like Bishop Stewart and say proceed. Proceed.
Hold on.
C report. C report.
I'm looking in the discipline.
C report.
And I'm trying to see the bishop of our church.
Exactly. And so here's the thing, and here's the disconnect.
Okay.
See, the disconnect with my generation is you're saying, well, even in a young age, you're going to be bishop, you're going to be bishop. And the older we get in the church, the more we're saying, man, this ain't the church of the 99, 2000s.
Right.
We seeing empty churches. We got a lot of people claiming growth, but we see what's going on. We got a lot of inflated numbers. We got a lot of churches with barely, I mean, talk about salaries. We could look at the salaries and tell the health of the church. And so when you say, oh, well, why don't we have young people being wanting to be bishops of the church, or running for bishop of the church? Is it worth it? Is the question as a young person. That's what we're asking ourselves. Is it worth? Which is why young people are walking off and would rather sit at home, some young people, than even take an appointment. And so we have to look at ourselves. We have to look at ourselves and say, what has been done for qualified, capable, seminary trained? It's not one, two, it's several. What has been done for them to say, you know what? I think I'll sit this one out. A lot. And we have to be honest with our system. We have to be honest with our churches. In the question, one thing I realized, I'm going through my therapy. Because therapy, as I keep pushing that for those who are listening, and if something is wrong, nothing is wrong with you. Go to therapy. Nothing is wrong. But be honest with yourself and be honest with your situation and say, you know what? Sometimes I'm not just fit for this situation, and I should not subject myself to the abuse of this situation. And that's what my generation is doing. They're saying, look, we don't have to deal with, we got these degrees, we got these credentials, we got other degrees. I mean, I got a master's in, me personally, I got a master's in counseling. I have several peers. They have masters of business administration. They have remote jobs now, so you have people who are dealing with things, and they're saying to themselves, man, do I want to deal with arguing over the color of carpet? Do I want to deal with, in which most of the issues, when I think about it, we have a lot of churches, but how many converted Christians are in those churches? Right? Because Christian, and just to be clear, we wouldn't be arguing over certain things. We wouldn't be arguing over why the pastor need a Sunday off. We wouldn't be arguing over whether we should be doing a pastor's appreciation for our pastor or not. We wouldn't be arguing over who the pastors day. All these issues that we bring up that are not right, that are inappropriate, that are sometimes hateful, that young preachers have dealt with and are dealing with, and sometimes paying the most conference claims. And I want to set the record straight. I've never had a young adult budget. I've never had the bishop didn't give me a young adult discount when it was time for me to bring my coins. When it was time for me to bring that $20,000, the bishop didn't say to me, well, let me give you the young adult discount. When they did the askings and the tellings, there were no discounts for young adults. So I'm an adult, I'm an adult. I'm a consenting adult. And I don't appreciate being placated. And that is what my generation is saying. Like, you're not going to placate me, use me, and then have me on a stool and not want my ideas, and then expect me to perform within your system without any of me. So that's being disingenuous to who I am.
Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else want to chime in on that? Because we are at a critical crossroads. All right, and this next election, and it's not only, as Sister Sharonda Greenlee reminded me, not only running for Episcopal leaders, but general officers, as well. So how do you effect change? Let me tell you what, I had an eye-opening experience trying to pull this panel together. All right. And I know that there are other preachers and pastors in your age group, but I reached out to some elders, and they reached out to me and said, well, I don't have any pastors who are 35 years or younger in my particular area. And so that was startling to some extent regarding the future of our church. So as we look at that question, someone said, should age be a consideration when electing general officers and Episcopal leadership? And so please give positive and negative perspectives on how age should be a part of the election decision. Disciplines, I think, now says that there needs to be at least one young adult delegate per region. Okay, now does that placate the situation? Does that satisfy? Is that doing what? Who used the term? I think it was pastoral. Trophy case, pulling the young adult out for the general conference just in time for the election. You do have power. So again, I'm asking the question: how do we as a church maximize the power? Because I also said, and you haven't said it, you said you're tired. I'm tired too, but there's probably a whole lot of frustration in our church. All right, in your group, in your age group, particularly. Well, in my age group as well too. And I'll be 59 on my next birthday. So what do we do? Octavia, this show is my therapy. This is the way I have an opportunity to sit, listen, to have a discourse with some of the people. And I'm so thankful for your honesty. I'm so thankful for your truthfulness. Anybody want to just chime in and talk about this moment that we're in our church as it relates to leadership? Because all of you will be impacted by it. All of us.
I do. I want to say something to this.
Yes,
even though
please do.
Some of us were talking, a few of the people in my region, in my conference, and we said, it starts at the conference level. We need to start electing delegates that are reflective of where we want to go. So the one thing, and I'll link it to what I do with my job, publishing a lot of marketing materials, and Pastor Zach is creating flyers and whatnot. You have to use graphics that visualize where you want to go. So I use a lot of intergenerational families because I want to show that we're going to minister to the children, we're going to minister to the parents, and we're also going to minister to the grandparents. I can't just use a picture of, baby boomers or even traditionalists and say, hey, we're going to have a youth night, young adult night, come here. You gotta represent where you're targeting, and you gotta pinpoint that group and that demographic. Well, right now we're at a pivotal point as we all enter into the annual conference season. And it would be nice to see bishops and the leaders really make it a point to say, no, we need to really push delegates that are in this younger age group now and make sure that they're the ones going to general conference, not just placating it, as was said earlier, with one member. Why not change the demographic of the group altogether that's going? Like was said, in 30 years, a lot of the leadership is going to be out of the way anyway. It's time to make a shift. And just as COVID made us pivot pretty abruptly, it's time to pivot in that direction just as abruptly, because we see that there's a line of demarcation in regards to our church membership, especially when it comes to age. We need to deal with it. We need to address it. And again, like I said, I don't have all of the answers, but I know one of the solutions is we really need to get together in our annual conferences, and we need to have this discussion there so that we can start the process and move this ball forward.
Anyone else before I move on to my next question?
Let me jump in real quick. I hate to keep talking, but you're asking so many good questions. I want to first say I'm so glad Reverend Moore is on here with us. My sister is on here because she can speak from a different perspective pastorally than some of us can. And she speaks from a perspective of one who has experienced what we are experiencing and who has decided to pastor in a different context by remaining faithful, though, to her denomination. But there are some of us who experience the same problems, and in some regards are fed up with the same things, but we decide each day to continue in what I want to tag traditional pastoral leadership. And there's nothing wrong with either choice, because we enact change and have the ability to enact change in both ways. I want to highlight your original question about why isn't there 30-plus year old, 30-ish, 20-ish year olds running for bishop. It's not because some folk have not thought about it. It's because we all know it's not an option. And I just want to be real, since this is a real space, that it is not that we don't run because we think we cannot serve the church in that capacity. And I'm saying this humbly now, but we don't run because we know we won't be elected. And there's a lot of rivers flowing into that pond, but that's the reality of the current state of our church. And so then we must ask ourselves the question, what can we do where we are, and I'm going to use this word, allowed to be? What can we do in the spaces where we have access? And I'm going to give a shout out to my bishop personally. I have a bishop who not only has a conversation with me just to say he's had a conversation, but he hears me once we've had that conversation and makes change to help and support other young pastors and young preachers in the 3rd Episcopal District. And so that's the place that I want to hang my hat, is that our Episcopal leaders, both current and present, began to intentionally cultivate relationships with the young preachers they have, hear what they have to say, and humble themselves enough to make change based on those conversations. I'm tired of folks just having conversations with young preachers just to say they had them. But let's have that conversation with the intention to change our behavior after we've had those conversations. And so I just wanted to drop that in.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. I would still say that if it's the heart's desire for someone in that age group to run, they ought to run with vigor. You don't know until you run. You don't know that there may be some older folks who are looking for fresh faces, new faces. And this is not any reference to the candidates that are running. I'm just simply saying that you never know, okay, until you offer yourself, all right, until you become the underdog, all right. Now, and you run, and it comes with a price, you know, and trust me, I know I've been head of an organization. I was not the chosen candidate, but I ran. I was crucified, dead and buried, but I rose again. Praise God, hallelujah. You know, but I have no regrets. I have no regrets for offering myself as a candidate for that position. You know, and so if the church is going to change, you all are going to change it. Otherwise, this just becomes another conversation. You know, and then you get to general conference. You know, and young adults have power. All right. You have power, you know, and you have to know how to harness that power for the good of the church. So my next question to you is one that should bring. Yes, sir.
I want to. Can I drop a little tidbit?
Yeah, go ahead, Andre.
To answer what Zach is saying.
Yes.
I think Zach put it in a very, very, very eloquent way about, you know, being at a place and at a space, you know, where you're allowed to be. But I think there's a biblical reference that not just young adult leaders may need to search within our hearts to figure out why, you know, no one's running, why no one has offered themselves. But I think the church needs to look deep within itself. And I think Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 15 sums it up, where, you know, there's a conversation going on. He simply says, I will give you pastors after your own heart. The question is, when we look at what we have and when we look at what the church elects, in my opinion, that is what the church is saying. This is what our heart's desire is. And I don't know if the church has loudly said our heart's desire is to see a younger leader or a leader who has, you know, a young heart, young ideas, young fresh, whatever. I don't think that has been the heart of the church. So I think the church has gotten what the church has wanted.
So then it may be time for a heart transplant. You know, it may be time for something cataclysmic, you know, to happen in the church, because otherwise we're gonna be singing the same old blues, the same old song.
Dr.
You know, yes, Chaplain Moore. Go ahead.
I just have a question.
Yes.
Because what it sounds like you're asking is for the young adults to save this church. And in my mind, I'm trying to wrap my mind around how can a young adult, you know, we're still dealing with issues of accepting women in ministry in our churches in many places.
Exactly.
So I'm trying to wrap my mind around, you know, how a young adult can come and quote, save this church. And I think about what's going on in the world, and I can't help but compare that analogy to, it's like asking an African-American male specifically to reform the justice system.
Right.
That's equivalent. That's equivalent of what it takes. You know, why is the justice system not? Well, the young people need to do something. You know, they need to, you know, if we're not doing it right, it should not be a either or in church. It has to be a both and. I would say this. Growing up at Carter Temple under both pastors, I only had 2 pastors in my life. That was another thing. Growing up, I saw intergenerational. Pastor Parker mentioned it, intergenerational, where everyone worked. When you look at these annual conference pictures, you see many missionaries, you know, and they little dollies and the white. You see them of every age level. You see them of every, and we look at the pictures of the preachers, you know, every age level. And recently we look at it and I said, man, it's a huge gap, you know. And so asking us to say, hey, one of you, maybe y'all should run for bishop. Unfortunately, it sounds like it would be a setup. And and that's what I feel like it would be. I feel like it would be a setup. I feel like it would possibly be a money grab. And I feel like it would also be an embarrassment, a public embarrassment. And the thing about it that I don't know, that makes me want to holler and throw my hands up is a lot of these churches, because, you know, now, you know, I grew up, it was 20 churches on the block. These Baptist churches, especially now, they're looking at us online. They're looking at the preachers who can preach, and they're saying, hey, oh, so your church is barely paying you? Well, this is what we can offer. Oh, they won't pay your health insurance? Well, we offer health insurance because they're looking at the investment. And so, not saying that we, you know, fatten up the frogs for the steaks in the CME church, but we have to begin to value our younger pastors and treat them as younger pastors and value their leadership. You know, and if we can't value their leadership at a pastoral level, then how are we going to value them at an Episcopal level? It will be a magnified problem. And so it has to be older and younger people stepping up saying, you know, even general conference officers, you know, it's not just being a bishop isn't the end all be all for fixing the church. It's the entire foundational structure that has to be fixed, because it happens from the inside out. We need more than just church people. We need Christians. We need people of God to come together and say, wait a minute, we gotta stop this, because it sounds like sometimes we're fighting against one another, but yet we're working on the same side. And instead of us growing, instead of us saying, hey, I know that Leon Parker can do grants, and I know that we have a position in our church that really needs help, that can locate somewhere. Why don't we own hotels? Why don't we own and the millennium generation is not the first generation to say these things. I my people, the people who went before me, the Felix Johnsons and the Mario Murphys and the Keith Ellingson, that generation. I look at your generation, Skip, and I look at the preachers who have disappeared off of the scenes. I look at the Reverend Kwesi Kamals. I look at the people who are doing well. It's no longer to a point where we say, oh, if you leave, you ain't gonna be nothing. Well, I look at some people and they doing pretty well. And so we have to be honest with ourselves and stop pitching it like, you know, you need us, because my generation is saying, oh, we do. No, we're here because God called us to be here. We want to do the work that's assigned to our hands, and we can't be scared with tactics, and we have to work together. And I believe that if we can work together intergenerationally, if, like how Pastor Zach said, his bishop don't just talk to him to say he talked to his one young adult token. No, he talks to him because he knows that Zach has intrinsic wisdom and knowledge on how to do something, and he needs to know, and he needs to know how can they do better. They have genuine dialogue. And so the minute we can be honest and have genuine dialogue is the minute I think I can see the church shift. And these candidates who are running, the minute that they can talk genuine, straight talk, no chaser, is the minute that I can see, man, the church will be off to a better direction.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's quite an interesting perspective that you've given. And I love how you've taken it at various generational levels. We know we have had pastors who have left our church for whatever reason. Okay. We know that there are people who are barely hanging on by a thread. Okay. We know that people have questions and about, why isn't there support? Why isn't there health insurance for pastors, in this church with all of the pastors that we have, the apportionment. Here's another question that came. Talk about the burden of conference apportionments and assessments. For some churches and pastors, they're able to pay it without any problem. Some are struggling, yet it is still that which is required. Anybody want to jump at this?
I'll talk about it a little bit. I've seen it on both ends. I've been at local charges where we had to actually raise the money, and I've been in charges where just based off the tithes, we can just write a check. However, as I see time progress, as I see issues arise, as I see buildings become dilapidated, as I see people go to glory. I mean, just alone in the last quarter, I've buried at least 5 to 10 people. We see that the budgets and families and all things kind of shift. And so when we talk about apportionments, for me, it is a sacrifice. It is a job. I mean, when I accepted my call to preach, I did not know that I was going to also have to be a CFO. And I think that's an issue that we have in our churches, that we don't allow people to operate in their true callings. A person say that they're called a priest, but we automatically want to make them a pastor. A person says that they're called to a higher calling, and we want to dangle that you could be a bishop one day if you keep paying your assessments and go to this school and that school. When you talk about the burden, we have to look at it overall. And I think in order for our church to heal from a financial aspect, a spiritual, and even church growth, right? We have to have the conversation. We have to look at our church. We have to have a deconstruction process before we can reconstruct. We need to be honest with ourselves. We need to put the things on the table, the promises that were made at these general conferences, right? Where's the return of our investments? Where is the decrease in the apportionments? Some of these candidates are running with these, they're running with the slogans or with the platforms that they want to see some of the apportionments go back into the local church. We need to do something because if we're not growing the church, y'all hear me? If we're not growing the church and people are still constantly going to heaven, how are we going to pay these apportionments in the next 5 years? When pastors and presiding elders are sacrificing their salaries so they could become round and across the sheet, so that their livelihoods are not threatened. These are some serious issues. And so I say I talk about this all the time. We're not having the conversations that the United Methodists had 20 years ago. We're not having the conversations that the AMEs were having 10, 15, 20 years ago about merging, about creating different ways of raising income for the general church to offset what we're taxing and putting on the local church. You know what I can do with $30,000 in the local congregation? You know how much outreach that I can do? To speak to people, to invite them, to disciple them, right? Because see, we're looking for members, right? We're looking for members so that we can report to the annual conference that we took in these people so that we can have the power on the floor at the general conference. We have got to deconstruct what we have believed in for so long that's really not helping us. And
but Leon, where does the deconstruction take place? And who's a part of the deconstruction team?
Well,
what does it consist of?
The strategic planning, we're already into a whole nother general conference, and it's been going on. You would think the strategic plan would bring about all bodies, young, old, from the college down to the janitor.
Let me ask this question. Go ahead.
And I pray that continues to go on, and that creates a solution for us to operate moving forward. But I think we have to be more intentional and time sensitive in doing that, because here we are coming to another general conference, and we hadn't really dealt with the strategic plan we were charged to do or to deal with when we were in Birmingham.
Pastor Kinsey and Pastor Royal, let me ask this question. Thank you, Pastor Parker. Have you found it challenging to raise your conference apportionment, your assessment? How has it been for you all as young pastors with a few years as a pastor?
It most definitely has. It has been a challenge to raise. This is my second year pastoring. Yeah, and we came real close to not being able to pay it last year, but we somehow we got through it, and we're still kind of battling that same thing. We're still trying to scrape together some things so we can get this thing paid off. So it is a bit of a challenge. And then honestly, I can say I feel like I'm by myself in it. That I've just been placed there, and it's like, hey, figure this thing out. And that's what we've been doing. I've just been going about it and trying to figure it out, and how we can pull these things together and get these things done. But yes, it has been a challenge.
Yeah.
And of course, like Reverend Parker said, imagine what we could do with the money that we raise that could be done for the local church or for the community in general. But is going far away.
Yeah.
Now let me condition that, because I'm a believer of the connectional church.
I mean, yes, most definitely.
A lot of the things that we do and the resources that we, and I know, Reverend Cal, I'm just talking for me, because you know how we are. Let me just say, I believe in the connectional church. I believe in the work that we do in Africa and Haiti and Jamaica and all of that. But I'm saying we've got to figure out something. If you want something you never had, you got to do some things that you've never done before. Let me shut up.
Listen, let's hear from Pastor Royal.
For myself, I've been pastoring for almost one conference year. And luckily, my pastor, Reverend Settles, that was there the entire time I attended my hometown church. He basically, when he retired, he stayed on to basically assist me and basically help me in my growth and development as being a pastor. And basically all of our, I guess, steps were already made when I became pastor of the church. So we really haven't had to deal with the conference apportionments because of that.
I see. Well, listen, you're mighty blessed.
Yes.
You are mighty blessed. I pastor West Mitchell Street, CME Church in downtown Atlanta, as Elder Woodford would say. And we have had success in raising funds through our parking lot ministry. All of the games at the Mercedes-Benz Dome, all of the Falcons games, all of the soccer games and concerts has blessed us tremendously. But for the last year, we have been without that parking lot money. Okay. We relied on the parking lot money. Amen to, I'm saying amen like I'm preaching. We relied on the parking lot money to pay our apportionment. Okay. God took us out.
When we were in seminary, we used to help West Mitchell.
I know you used to help West Mitchell. And so this year, we've had to depend on tithes and offerings to get it paid. Now, God is showing us, all right, it's getting there, all right. And so, but it's challenging. We have work we need to have done on the church building, while we're out. So at any rate, these are some of the things that we continue to talk about. Just a couple of more things, and I'm going to give you a chance to close out with whatever's on your heart and mind. Professor Shazetta Thompson Hill he says, she quoted my statement, something cataclysmic might need to happen. She would argue that this something you speak of has occurred now several times. I'm not sure what that is. I wish she would provide some clarity. What else do you suggest needs to occur? So I just wanted to put that question up. I thought it was quite an intriguing question. What are we looking forward to at the General Conference? What are you looking forward to? Are we doing the General Conference just for the election of the Episcopal leaders, which of course is very important? Is there anything else that you're hoping will happen at the General Conference that will create a major paradigm shift in the church? Anybody want to respond?
I'm praying that at this General Conference, we have serious conversations and legislations that will strengthen the church, whether it's financially, whether we're talking about merging or reviewing our assets to, number one, help offset the financial burdens of our local congregations so that they can do more ministry on the local level to create more disciples, which will strengthen the church, and everything else, all these other things will be added. Funds, intergenerational ministry, etc. I'm looking forward to the General Conference, hoping that we will have conversations and legislations that will strengthen our pastors, that will provide resources for their health, their mental health, their physical health. Pastor Lindsay is exactly right. I didn't say anything at the beginning of this conversation, but I'm tired as hell. When you have to lead a charge, but you also have to work 2 and 3 other jobs just to provide for your family and to also have funds available just in case you don't have the portionments or askings together. I'm tired, having to fight for our people, particularly in our community, and we're doing it without the support, in many cases, of our leaders. And so I pray that this General Conference, as we elect 3 new bishops, that's all well and fine, but that we really have some conversations to strengthen the church. We need to talk about merging. We need to talk about what we're really doing with these assets throughout our denomination. That's just me.
Thank you. Anybody else? What are you looking for?
I'd say when we talk about legislation, we also need to remind the body of the church that you have the authority and the opportunity to write those legislations, write your resolutions. I think oftentimes what happened is we talk a lot until it's time for General Conference and put nothing in writing. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I'll never forget, I had a presiding elder who said to the congregation when they were voting for me to be recommended to be a traveling deacon in the church, my elder said, "Now, I know y'all love him because he was raised in your church, but ask yourself the question before you vote for him, would you want him to be your pastor?" And the reason why I lift that up is because as we go to the annual conference, both virtually or in person, socially distanced, vote for people to be delegates who are going to have the church's best interest at heart. Pastors who ain't got it together shouldn't be delegates to the General Conference. Pastor fighters, hello lay people, should not be delegates to the General Conference, because if they won't pay your 12% at the local level, they ain't gonna vote for no legislation for you to have good enough housing, for you to have a good enough pension at the General Conference level. If you fight the pastor at home, you're gonna fight him at the General Conference. And so we just gotta make sure that the character of the people we send to vote on resolutions and to represent our church are not church folk, but Christians.
And I'm just praying for an outpouring.
Thank you, Pastor Zach.
You know, I'm praying for outpouring of the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost at the General Conference. I'm praying for an upper room experience, that we will be transformed by the renewing of our minds. I'm praying, the Bible says, if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray, you know, turn from their wicked ways, then will they hear from heaven. And I think some of the silence that we hear sometimes, and we're wondering, why is God not doing something to the church? We need to look introspectively, and we need to ask ourselves, what are we doing? What do we need to change? What are some things that we need to stop? Because it starts with us and it stops with us, you know, and I'm not talking about young adults or older adults. I don't even believe in the young adult title. I've been saying that for years. Those who know me, I'm an adult, you know, and I have adult bills. And so I think once we figure out a way where we can honor and respect everyone and bring everyone to the same table and be honest, you know, be honest about it and say, hey, how are we going to fix this? You know, one thing that I haven't heard, you know, I hear a lot of catchy phrases. I see a lot of fancy flyers. I love fancy flyers, but you know, those running for bishop, they have a lot of catchy phrases, a lot of fancy flyers. And I want to say in recent, even General Conference, those who are on General Connectional Board, all of these things, I see a lot of people who advertise, hey, this is what I can do for the church. This is what I can do. And my question is, what have they done from the last General Conference? The people who promised us all of these weird and wonderful things, what have they done? And if they haven't done it, what is the way that we can bring accountability to our system? What's going on with our pension? What's happening with, you know, we have to ask ourselves these questions, because at the end of the day, most for preachers my age, preaching was all I knew, right? I was a CME preacher from the age of 17 on. I pastored 13 years. It was never my heart's desire. 10 years ago, you couldn't catch me saying this where I'm at now. But after I've experienced some things, after what the old folks say, live a little while longer. After I did some living, and I did some praying, and I did some crying. It took some tears for me to get to a place where I say, man, this is this what the Lord wants for my life? You know, because it determines what you're doing is you're shaping a quality of life for us. And here's the question: are we going to accept it or not? And for the millennial generation, we're not. You heard Pastor Parker. Some of these pastors, they work 2 and 3 jobs. The question is why? And we know the answers to why. We know that we can look at, if I'm sacrificing my 12% to pay apportionment, therein lies a problem. Therein lies a problem. So are we taking care of our preachers? We have to ask ourselves these serious questions. We have to say, hey, the buck is going to stop here. When we go to these first quarter and these fourth quarter, you know, I think presiding elders need to be, you know, I don't know what the requirement is. I've been struggling as of late to understand, you know, the last 5 years. What is the requirement, you know, to be a presiding elder? What do they do? Who's standing with these pastors? And then I think we can move forward. Once we acknowledge what's happening, we need to start apologizing. Now, don't get me wrong. I love the church. I want to put that disclaimer out. I love the CME church, and I love you enough to be honest with you. And Bishop Williamson would tell us every Sunday when I was a kid, he would have us say, we love you, Pastor Williamson, because you always tell us the truth. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. Thank you. Closing thoughts, y'all. Whatever's on your heart and mind right now, we want to hear from everybody before we close out. Pastor Royal, any closing thoughts? And I know let me ask this question. Excuse me for interrupting. You've been pastoring for how long now?
Technically, I've been pastoring for almost a year after this quarter.
And so you will soon be a candidate for deacon, or are you all?
I'll be ordained because of the pandemic. My ordination was pushed back due to the pandemic.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to put that perspective out there. Give me your closing thoughts.
You know, I appreciate this conversation from everybody. And I really think that this all starts at the local level. You know, I see the events like the Connectional Youth and Young Adult Conference, which looks awesome. But I think in order for our young people to want to be engaged in those type of activities, it all starts at the local level. And that's really, you know, everything we've talked about. I think all of this, I'm excited to actually go back to my church, and now let's have this conversation with our members in a church meeting, and hold these type of conversations and start it all on a local level.
Thank you. It's a delight to have you on with us, and we pray God's blessings over you and your ministry. Reverend Brayboy, give us your closing thoughts, please.
Well, number one, I've just been blessed by everybody that's here, and everything that's been said. I want to answer the last question and say my prayer is that we shift to a kingdom mindset. And I know that sounds very simple and not original, but I think we need to focus on the souls of the people that are in our communities, and the rest of it, God will take care of that. But we need to drill down to the basics that we have an unchurched generation. We have people that are turning to other organizations that are speaking. And in my community alone, the Nation of Islam is out every weekend. They're moving in my community. I have the Hebrew Israelites moving on my son's college campus right now like never before. I'm constantly in conversations of apologetics, trying to, get them to understand what the truth of the gospel is. And right now, I think we just need to focus on the people in which we serve. We need to change hearts. We need to turn them to Jesus Christ and just focus on that one simple truth. And if we do that, then any generation, traditionalist on down to Z, will be able to shift the atmosphere and to change the world. And that's what I think we're hearing over and over and over again in this conversation. But I think we just need to do it with a pure heart. And I just appreciate being here. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Pastor Zach, who have we not heard from? Closing thoughts. And Pastor Lloyd, Pastor Kinsey, did we get your closing thoughts? Okay. Let's go with Pastor Lloyd, then we'll go to Pastor Zach, Pastor Kinsey, and then Pastor Parker. Unmute yourself, Pastor Lloyd.
Oh, I'm sorry. One of the things I just saw, Pastor Shazetta Hill, who, by the way, is a great Laneite in the church. But I saw her question, and I saw her elaborate on the question that you asked about the cataclysmic shift. Mm-hmm. And a lot of things that she named or she outlined, like decline in churches, young lay people leaving. If you want to be honest, that's one thing that we really need to tackle. I think we have a solid number of young adult preachers, young adult pastors to work with. But for me as a pastor, and I'm sure some of my young adult pastors will agree, if we don't get no young adult lay folk, I won't have no church to preach to or pastor to. So I think that we are losing a lot of our young adult lay people. And again, as Reverend Hill stated, that's a cataclysmic shift. But in my closing argument, I think if one of the things that the church needs to take serious too is that while some cataclysmic events have happened, I think there will be an important cataclysmic event that will happen at the General Conference. Agreeing with Pastor Parker and Pastor Mullens about policies and procedures, the talk about the closing and the merging of some of our churches, but as much as we want, some may agree, some may disagree. One of the cataclysmic things that will happen at this particular General Conference will be the election of the next 3 Episcopal leaders. And the reason I'm saying that is because if you look at our Episcopal leadership now, by 2030, if my math serves me correct, due to the law of our church, Bishop Sylvester Williams will be senior bishop, and every other bishop that will serve with him will have to be elected starting between now in 2030. And if we do the math, 2030 is not 10 or 15 years away from now. So I think one of the pieces of the cataclysmic shift that is going to happen is that this election of new Episcopal leaders, when we get to General Conference, will tell the church a lot about how we respond, as Reverend Hill said, how we are going to respond to the cataclysmic events that have already happened.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Reverend Lloyd. That's quite insightful. Pastor Zach.
Yes, as many of my counterparts have reiterated, there is an undying love for the church within my heart and within our hearts. The church has been good to me personally, and I am grateful that the majority of promises made to me were fulfilled, and that God has given me mentors and allies in spaces where I cannot be. But that is unfortunately not the story for everyone. Mm-hmm. And as a leader in the church, both in young adulthood and if you're a senior, we must always be allies for people whose stories are not as fortunate as we are. And so that is what I believe God is calling all of us to be during this present time. I'll say this. I first want to say to Willie Robinson, I believe he's my lay leading brother from the 9th Episcopal District. He asked
we all know Brother Robinson.
Yes. I was trying to be humble and acting like, he's not well known. But Brother Robinson posed the question of how do I label a pastor fighter? I believe iron sharpens iron, but I also believe there's a thin line between a lay person challenging the pastor to be all that they can be and negatively placing roadblocks in the way between the vision of God and the success of the church. And so anybody who is negatively placing roadblocks in the way between a pastor's God-given vision and the fulfillment of that vision through the success of the church does not need to be a delegate to any general conference. Let me just again give a shout out to 3D, my Episcopal leader, my beautiful wife and children, my mother and grandmother, who I'm sure am watching. And let me give out a shout out to the church, the CME Church, who has raised me and taught me to be all that I can be. Thank you, Skip, for this opportunity. And I'll jokingly say this, you talked about running for bishop. We'll all make our flyers tonight and we'll run at the next general conference. I'm kidding.
I absolutely love it.
Oh no, you know where I want to go.
And Leon, we know Zach's flyers will be off the chain.
And Leon, we'll send you to the school. We're going to send you to the school. We know where you want to go.
They will be super creative. Pastor Kinsey, and then y'all make sure y'all shout out your bishops now. Okay, if you haven't called your bishop's name out once in this episode, you better not close out without saying hello to your Episcopal leader, Pastor Kinsey.
Let me say
your bishop is watching.
Walker. We thank God for Bishop Walker and his mind. He always amazes me at how he thinks and how he puts things together. And he's so smooth with it too, and how he says it and how he lays it out. And I'm just really grateful to have a leader like that. And one thing that going forward, we also have, I say the church needs a level of transparency and honesty and openness, because what a lot of people say is that the church is filled with hypocrites. And people will say one thing and do another, but if we will go forward and just be open and honest with who we are and what we do and how we do things, I think that will be a great deal of help to bring in more youth and young adults and younger people, so that they can see that it's not easy and it's not something that we can do every day or all day, but it is a process of things that we go through, and that life experiences causes us to those feelings and those emotions will show up in some type of way or form. And so that if we are honest in how we feel about a thing, I feel like that'll help us to express it in a positive way. And so, yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. I obviously don't have enough words to even be up here with all these great panelists. And I was really honored and super nervous to be a part of this. And I just thank you for inviting me. And thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Thank you. Oh, you are so welcome. You've been such a blessing to the kingdom. And we just pray God's blessings on you. I think Octavia gave her final word. She's probably conjured up a few more thoughts in between, but we're going to let Pastor Parker have the final word. Octavia, do you have anything else you need to say?
Oh, I just thank you for this opportunity. I certainly felt out of place among these panels of pastors who I want to say that I admire you all for what you all are doing in the church. I admire the fact that you have to pastor from a distance and the disadvantage and the things that you all have had to learn and the people who have been giving you great difficulty. I know the struggle and I see the weariness, but I appreciate what you're trying to do, not just to advance the CME church, but to advance the kingdom of God. It's a God-called mission. And so I just thank you all. And to my bishop of the First Episcopal District, who was also my pastor, my first pastor, Bishop Henry Williamson, I give him honor on today. And also to all of my mentors. I've had the pleasure of serving with several bishops. And Bishop Thomas, I paid, my team Moore has paid their United Negro NAACP,
right.
Team Moore, me and my husband. All right, I'm a good CME. We both paid for our memberships, Bishop. I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you so much. Pastor Leon F. Parker III, you get the final words.
Thank you, Dr. Basin, for this platform, and as well to my colleagues who joined us tonight. Thank you so much for sharing and for giving your insight from where you sit. I'm grateful for the CME Church. Although I was not born in, I joined in, but from the south side of Chicago to Nashville, Tennessee, I felt the love of the Connection of Church from Bishop Henry Williamson, who is my current presiding prelate, but was my pastor for 16 years, to Bishop Sylvester Williams, who was my pastor for 12 plus years. I'm grateful for this church. To Teresa Snorton, who took me under her wings when I went to Miles College. I am grateful. And so I'll leave with this. I really want to sow into particularly Nia and Joquan as they continue to move forward in their ministries, and to young adults who are feeling and receiving the call to preach or to teach or to serve in some capacity in the life of the church. You're going to be met with challenges, but run your race. You're going to be met with difficult times, difficult people, difficult leaders, but run your race. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding. Acknowledge God. Put God first, and He will direct your path. Before I get out of here, I want to shout out the St. Luke CME Church, as well as to all young adults across the Connection. Keep pushing, keep serving, keep doing what God is telling you to do, and everything is going to be all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I am so blessed that you took almost 2 hours and 13 minutes, actually 2.5 hours of your Sunday evening to share with us. Your thoughts, your words are recorded, and people will be able to look and view them, and they can say, this is the future of the CME Church. I think yesterday I received in the mail, like many of you did across the Connection. If not, you will get it. The annual statement that comes from Dr. Tyrone Davis, your retirement plan. And it is a sober reminder for me that I'm just about 16 years off from retirement of the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. But you all are young, you're thoughtful, and you have much to bring. And I think, as Jacqueline Henry Carter said, Jesus did his best work at the age of 33. I needed to get that out. But, you have so much ahead of you. And the church needs you. They need your voice, your energy, your vitality, and most importantly, they need your honesty. We need your honesty. And I think that's the value of what you bring. And so I'm grateful to all of you. Press on, take some time for yourself, self-care. Let's all get therapists like Chaplain more if you haven't already. And let's push through this thing, because at the very heart, I think we love God, obviously. But there's something about the CME Church that we each love, despite its imperfections and despite the things that we observe and we see. And I think at the end of the day, our love for the people is what counts. And our love for our churches and God's kingdom. So God bless each of you. Let me say tomorrow, there will be closing arguments for the Derek Chauvin case regarding George Floyd. And we don't know what the outcome of the verdict is, but it is going to have an impact on us one way or the other, particularly as preachers of the gospel. And we pray that God will continue to use you to help the people to see what is going on in the world. I did not realize, well, I did realize, but even more so now, how much they really depend on the word, how much they depend on you to convey some thoughts and to help them through this pandemic. So I want to close with this video tribute regarding Black Lives Matter, because it is appropriate. And of course, if a preacher has not uttered those words or preached what it is about, as Dr. Love Henry Welch would say, you ain't preaching about much. So thank you, my brothers and sisters. I'll see you all, God willing, next Sunday at 5:00 p.m. for another episode of Conversations with Skip Mason, Facebook Live, CME 150. And don't forget tonight, you have the workshop by Victor Thomas. God bless you. And here is that video.
George Floyd repeatedly told the officers that he could not breathe after an officer knelt on his neck.
The family of George Floyd held a memorial in his memory.
My brother's gone, but the Floyd name still lives on.
George Floyd, you are gone but not forgotten. Because of you, we've come together.
This is for George Floyd.
It's all right to be angry. But we are going to take our anger and our indignation and turn it into energy. George Floyd! George Floyd! Justice!
To march. To dance, to kneel, to be quiet. We're saying your name. We're saying their names. We're being loud.
Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot!
We're being brave. We're laughing. We're crying. We're getting engaged. We're getting married. We're changing the world.